Judges chapter 9, we are continuing our study through the book of Judges. And this is how I've broken down the chapter. When I say I've broken down the chapter this way, I mean that these are the three main divisions that I see in there. Now, other Bible teachers, better Bible teachers, might see different sections and whatever else. But as I'm studying and praying and asking God for wisdom to be able to share with you all, these are the things that jumped out at me, the divisions. We're going to see conspiracy in verses 1 to 6, and then a curse pronounced. Okay, we're not talking, voodoo dolls and those types of things. We'll see what the curse is all about there. And then we'll see the crime settled. Now, for you and I will get to verse 21 today. So we'll get through the first two main divisions today, and then next time we are together, we will cover the final section there, beginning at verse 22. But for today, we start with conspiracy in verses 1 to 6, and we'll get into that in just a moment. I want to remind all of you that, by the way, myself and Matt, we were the two guys, and then Emily and Brooke yesterday, along with a whole bunch of girls, spent the day out at Joshua Tree and National Park, and it was a lot of fun, climbing up things and going to places that we shouldn't have because it was dangerous or whatever. It was really, really, really good day. And Rylan and Leah, who you might not know because, Rylan was just up here, but anyhow, they led worship for us out there. And then Mariah shared the word, had a Devo planned, and so it was a really, really good day. A really special day. It was the first time in the history of Chris Amaro, which is so important to you, I know. But it was the first time in the history of youth ministry that I've been involved in where I took just a girls group. And it was a good day. It was a good day. So I told them, man, we had so much fun, I'm not taking the guys anymore. It's like, you know what, I'm not taking the guys. No, we'll do some more guys trips in the future, but hopefully we'll do some more girls trips also in the future. We are in Judges 9, like I said. Let's look at verse 1, beginning at verse 1, which is the conspiracy. Let's find out what's going on here. I'll read verse 1, and then I'll give you some background in the event that you haven't been here for the study, and you're like, what does this all mean? Let's start with reading verse 1. Then Abimelech, the son of Jerubbaal, went to Shechem, to his mother's brothers, and spoke with them and with all the family of the house of his mother's father, saying, now we'll get into his message in just a moment, but who is this Abimelech and who is this Jerubbaal, with the two B's, two A's, and what is Shechem and his mother's brothers and the family of the house of his fathers? What's going on? So we've just finished the 3 chapters prior to this. So 6, 7, and 8 were the story of Gideon, a man named Gideon. Gideon was a reluctant leader, didn't want to lead, but God led him to that place where he surrendered and he led. He did what God wanted him to do. Now, he started out kind of shaky. Then he really focused his eyes on the Lord and just was obedient, did what God wanted him to do. And then the last part of his life, he didn't do what God wanted him to do. And he started, we said in our study when we were looking at chapter 8 last time, that the power went to his head, which happens with a lot of people, right? You might be on a baseball team or something, volleyball team, and the team captain, it might not be that big of a deal, but, they're the team captain, and they're letting the power go to their head. So everybody understands that phrase when I say he let the power go to his head, Gideon. And what Gideon ended up doing was there were 2 things that he did. He made this vest. It was a special vest made out of gold. So it's the weirdest thing. He makes this golden vest and he sets it up at his house. Okay, why did he do that? Well, I don't know exactly why he did that. We're not told. But after he did that, the people that were following him into battle, the people of the Israelites, they ended up worshiping that golden vest. And you go, what? Why would they do something weird like that? That's the problem. Why did they do that? I don't know. They wanted something to worship, and that's what they picked. It was the weirdest thing. But the other thing that Gideon did wrong at the end of his life was that he married multiple women. Now, this is something that is common throughout the Old Testament. As you're reading through the Old Testament, and we've done it as we've been studying through the Old Testament, we have come across people that had multiple wives. And that's one of the complaints from critics of the Bible. Among other things, well, with this and that, I don't like these things. But one of the complaints is, well, look at these people, these guys that had multiple wives. And why was God okay with that? That is what we call God's permissive will. Permissive will. What does that mean? It means that he allows that to take place. He's not necessarily blessing that. It's not okay with him. It's just that he didn't stop it. Why didn't he stop it? That's a good question. I don't know. After, 25, or almost, probably about 25, maybe almost 30 years of teaching the Bible, I can tell you that there are still things that I do not understand about God. I don't know. Why does God allow some things, but he stops other things? I don't know. That's God's prerogative, man. He can do that. So why did he allow some of these guys, these Bible characters, leaders, to marry multiple women? Well, he permitted it, he allowed it, but that doesn't mean that he was okay with it. And what oftentimes happens, and if you've been here on Wednesday nights with us, you will know, we've talked about this, that in our Wednesday night series through Philippians, that sometimes God he'll allow something to happen, some disobedience, some sin, and he doesn't stop it. You go, what's he doing? But then what he'll do is, in order to discipline the individual, he won't throw down a lightning bolt. People always talk about that, like, oh, you better not sin or God's going to strike you with a lightning bolt. Or, once in a while you'll be talking to somebody and they'll say something like, I hate God or whatever, and somebody standing next to them will go, oh, let me move over before you get struck with a lightning bolt. Well, God doesn't send lightning bolts down, but what he will do oftentimes is, in disciplining us when we've been disobedient, is he'll allow us to sin and then allow us to experience the consequences of that sin. And that's oftentimes how God disciplines us, by you made a choice, or you've heard the phrase, you made your bed, now sleep in it. That means you made the choice, now you got to deal with the consequences. Well, that is what happens in Judges chapter 9. Now, Gideon at this point is dead, so he's no longer around. But what happened was he had married multiple women. He was not supposed to do that. It was not okay with God. But it was a case of God allowing him to do that, and then the consequences come after. Now, sadly, his family experiences the consequences of his bad choices, and we'll see that here. But what happened was, Gideon, we were told in chapter 8, had multiple wives, but then he also had at least one concubine. And we talked about what a concubine is. It's not one of those animals with all the little thorns on it. It's a porcupine, okay? A concubine was an extra woman. Not a wife, not an official wife, but just I don't know how else to put it other than in terms you understand. It's a side chick. Just, she's out there. And we were told that she was living in a different town, and he had a bunch of kids with his wives, but then he also had a son with his side chick, okay? And the son from that side chick, his name was Abimelech. Boom, here we are in verse 1. Then Abimelech. But here's the problem. Then Abimelech, the son of Jerubbaal. And you go, wait a minute. The son of Jerubbaal, I thought he was the son of Gideon. Well, he is. What we learned a few chapters back is that Jerubbaal was another name that was given to Gideon. His name is Gideon, but his dad actually one time called him Jerubbaal. Now, what is Jerubbaal? Why do they, and I'm sharing this for those of you that are not aware of the story, so I'm catching you up. Jerubbaal means, let Baal plead. Let Baal plead. Let Baal plead. What is a Baal? Well, Baal was the name of the popular god in that region. Not God, not the God that we're worshiping, not the God of the Bible. This was a false god. They had idols and different things set up for Baal. Well, what happened was, when God was beginning to work in Gideon's life, the very first thing that he told Gideon was, or the first thing that he told him to do. He says, I want you to go out to your dad's backyard, and he's got an altar set up for worshiping Baal. So Gideon's own dad was an idolater, okay? A disobedient, sinful idolater. And he had an altar set up for this god Baal. And what we find out is that the men of the city would actually all gather there to worship at that altar. So the first thing that God does is he tells Gideon, I want you to go destroy your dad's altar, burn it, break it up, burn it, and you're going to destroy it. So Gideon does that. He does it at night because he's scared, but he does it. Well, the next day, all the men show up because they're ready to worship, and they realize, hey, somebody broke the altar to Baal, and they're using the pieces over there to, they're burning them, and they're making some kind of sacrifice over there. Well, they find out that it was Gideon that did it. So they tell his dad, they say to his dad, listen, we know that it was your son that broke down our altar to Baal, and you need to bring him out here because we're going to kill him. Well, his dad at that point, who had been worshiping Baal, says to the guys, you'll do no such thing. He said, what are you going to do? You're going to fight Baal's fights? You're going to go to battle for him? If he's the god, Baal, shouldn't he be fighting for himself? So what he said was, let Baal plead for himself if he's really a god. So then when he looked at his son Gideon, he goes, I'm calling you Jerub-Baal from now on. That way, when people see Gideon, they go, oh, as he's walking through town, oh, there's Jerub-Baal. And every time they say that, they remember, oh yeah, he was the one that broke down the altar, and Baal didn't defend himself, didn't do anything because he's a false god. He's not the true God. So every time they saw Gideon, they would call him Jerub-Baal, and then they would remember what had happened. Okay? So Abimelech, who's the son of Jerub-Baal, and Jerub-Baal, or Gideon, his side chick, went to Shechem. Now, what is this Shechem? What's going on there? Shechem was a special city, special area where some significant things had happened in Israel's past. Most notably, and we're going to see that in our story, Joshua, who was a leader from a long time ago, Joshua had gathered all the people at Shechem, had entered into an agreement there, had made an agreement with God there, and set up a monument to God there in Shechem. Okay? So we're going to see that in our story. But here's what happens in verse 1. Abimelech, the son of Jerub-Baal, went to Shechem. Okay, got it. He's the son of Jerub-Baal and the concubine. Got it. He went to his mother's brothers and spoke with them and with all the family of the house of his mother's father. So basically what that means is he went to speak to his family. Okay? His family, his on his mom's side. And it says in verse 2, please speak in the hearing of all the men of Shechem in verse 2. Speak to all of them. Pass this message on. And he asks a question. Which is better for you? That all 70 of the sons of Jerub-Baal reign over you? Or that one reign over you? Remember that I am your own flesh and bone. Now we learned some things here. He's making this appeal in verse 2. Talking to all the leaders of Shechem. And what he's doing is he's appealing and asking for the position of leader. He wants to lead them. What he wants to do is be their king. He wants to be Israel's first king. And he wants to appoint himself, and he wants to get these people to support him and appoint him. So I want to be the king. Okay? But notice what he says in verse 2. Which is better for you? He asks this question. Which is better for you? That all 70 of the sons of Jerub-Baal. And Jerub-Baal is who? What's his other name? Gideon. Thank you very much. Jerub-Baal is Gideon. Two names, same guy. He's got 70 sons. Now, how in the world do you have 70 sons? Well, as I told you before when we were looking at verse 1, he had multiple wives. So because he had multiple wives, he had multiple kids, multiple sons, no doubt had daughters also, but he's got 70 sons. 70. Can you imagine? Are any of you from a family of all boys? Anybody in here? All boys? Yes, all boys? Okay. All boys, man. I mean, even you ladies that are in here, if you have brothers, the guys are just different, right? They're just different. You know, they just the way they think or the way they do, the way they eat is just it's a whole different ball game, right? They'll just eat anything in large quantities, large masses. You know, that's what Costco and Sam's Club, those were created for boys. You know, families that were raising boys. You know, just buy a package of ramen. You know, what's it called? Whatever those are called. You know, it's like they'll just eat it. You know. And they may not even take the time to warm up water and put it in there. Like, who's got time to just open the package and eat the dry noodles? It's crazy, right? A whole different thing. Can you imagine 70 sons? That's wild, 70 sons. Now, I grew up, I had 2 sisters, but I also had these 2 cousins that lived with us off and on for long periods of time, because you know how us Mexicans are. We always like to have extra people now. But anyways, we had these 2, and they were older than me, man. I mean, we could put the food away, man. We just eat like crazy. And then back then we used to make Kool-Aid all the time. I mean, just pictures of Kool-Aid, mix another one, mix another one, it's crazy. So, I mean, this is how boys are. Everybody knows that. So he's got 70 sons from all these different wives, right? Now, what's happening is Abimelech is going, hey, you want all 70 of these sons of Jerubbaal leading you? Or wouldn't it be better to have one over you, one leader, that he says in there in verse 2. And then he says, remember that I am your own flesh and bone. Remember that he's talking to his mother's brothers and to those of his house, of his mother's father, so his mother's side of the family. And, he's like, hey, wouldn't it be better if I were your leader instead of them? I'm your own flesh and blood. But 70 sons, that's crazy. Now, here's what happens in verse 3. And his mother's brothers, so that would be his uncles. Yes, that's correct. Mother's brothers spoke all these words concerning him in the hearing of all the men of Shechem. And their heart was inclined to follow Abimelech, for they said, he is our brother. So they gave him 70 shekels of silver from the temple of Baal Berith, with which Abimelech hired worthless and reckless men, and they followed him. Okay? Now, there's some things going on here. They took him and they said, hey, we want you to be our king or whatever. But they said in verse 3, and their heart was inclined to follow Abimelech, for they said, he is our brother. He's our family member. So you've got our heart, man. Our heart is yours. Now, it's important to know this, that oftentimes, not every time, but oftentimes, when somebody is aspiring or hungry for leadership and they're trying to get the position, they're trying to work their way into that position or elect themselves as the leader, that oftentimes, not every time, but oftentimes they will not be a good leader. The best leaders are always going to be those that they don't want to be a leader, and they're the ones that are going to be able to lead with humility and with that mindset of, man, I need to serve. Lots of people, when they're aspiring toward leadership and wanting a leadership position, it is not because of necessarily the position and the responsibilities that go along with that, but it's because of what we call the bennies, the benefits, right? The benefits that go along with that. Well, you know what? If I am the student body, president, I can get out of class a lot, go work on special projects. Or, you know what, if I'm the team captain, then I don't have to do the drills. I can just call the drills out. You guys do what I tell you to do. And so oftentimes people are looking for that leadership position because of what it provides them. Now, again, we've been going through Philippians on Wednesday nights. And those of you that have been here, you may remember that I was talking a week or two ago about the fact that a position of leadership is not, and it shouldn't be looked at as, all right, I've ascended to a better position. Now I have more people to serve me. That's the way it is in the business world. You bump up. Now you do less and you boss more people around. And they got to do what you know, hey, first thing is, bring me my coffee. 2 creams, 3 sugars, bring it. And they're looking for ways to have other people serve them. But that's not the way it works in biblical leadership, godly leadership. The godly leader or the biblical leader sees that the opposite way. The higher up I go in leadership and serving God, what that does is it gives me a greater responsibility over more people. What does that mean? It means that now that I've got more people, so to speak, underneath me, that means I've got more people that I need to serve. That's what that means. So a promotion in the family of God, in church, should really in one way be seen as a demotion. In other words, I'm moving up. Well, now I'm an assistant pastor, or now I'm actually the pastor. That should be, in my mind, in my heart, what that should do is indicate a need for me to lower myself even more. And now that I'm higher in the church, that means there are more people to serve. That's how that should be viewed. That is biblical leadership. That's the way it always looks in the Bible. If you sense that God may be directing you toward some leadership position, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, so you could throw it out if you want, the best book to read on leadership is the book of Nehemiah. Nehemiah, in the Bible, Nehemiah is a godly leader, and as you read the book of Nehemiah, read his story, and it's just a section of his life, really. He leaves a palace in order to go serve other people. And he's always praying about everything. Drives me crazy because I don't pray enough. It's like, every time I read that, I go, man, I need to pray more. But that's where we get, those of you that have been around for a little while, you've heard me say, I haven't said it in a while, but you've heard me say the 3 C's of prayer. 3 C's of prayer. Conceive it in prayer, conduct it in prayer, conclude it in prayer. So everything that we do should be conceived in prayer. So before I just jump out there and start doing it, I need to be praying, asking God, you lead, Lord, you bring this about. You give me the vision. Conceive it in prayer. And then as I'm doing it, I want to conduct it in prayer. So I'm praying as I'm doing it still. Asking God for wisdom, asking him to direct me. And then I want to conclude it in prayer. That means after the task is done, then I want to stop and say, God, thank you so much for what you did. And please, continue to bless this project or whatever it is, the 3 C's of prayer. So Nehemiah is a great example, wonderful picture of leadership. And so the book of Nehemiah, but what we have here is an individual in Abimelech he wants to get into that leadership position because he wants to be lofty, he wants to be above everybody else. So in verse 3, the men of Shechem, they go, oh yeah, you've got our hearts, Abimelech, we're going to follow you, you're our family member. So in verse 4, they gave him 70 shekels of silver from the temple of Baal Berith. That means Baal, or what they're saying is the God of the covenant, God of the agreement. So they go to that temple, they take 70 shekels of silver, and they give it to Abimelech. And then look what it says at the end of verse 4. With which Abimelech hired worthless and reckless men, and they followed him. Now, just so you know, okay, just so it's clear for all of us, it's always a bad idea to follow someone that hires worthless and reckless men. Those are not 2 great qualities. Those are terrible qualities that you do not want influencing your life. So for you young ladies, you're not trying to, you're not looking for a husband. Lord, would you please send me someone with worthless and reckless qualities? You don't want that. Okay, that's the opposite of what you want. And but even for the guys, these are not people that you want to spend your time with. Some people go, oh, what Jesus did it. I get that, but Jesus was there to minister, not to get from those people, but to give. When I was just a young, I was really, to be honest with you, I was a boy. I was in junior high. When I was in junior high, I started to go out and partying and doing things I just never should have done at any age. But I had older cousins, and they lived with us, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, and they really were like my brothers. They still are to this day. But because they were living with us, they were going out to parties, and so then I started going out with them when I was in junior high and drinking and just doing all the stuff. And they, of course, hung out with people that were their age. And so what did I do? I hung out with people that were their age and did even more things. But what happened was they, all of us encouraged each other to do those things. It was worthless and reckless. And some of those guys, I'm not trying to speak bad about them, some of those guys that I spent some of those formative years with, you know, they've paid the price for that kind of a lifestyle, being worthless and reckless. I mean, just sinful things like going out and, oh, you know what, there's nothing else to do, let's go find somebody to beat up. I mean, literally, nothing else to do, let's go find somebody to beat up. And they would go start a fight with somebody just so they'd have something to do. That's what you call worthless and reckless. So that's not something that you want influencing your life. So, but that's what this guy did. Now, here's the deal. Verses 2 through 4, what I did was I titled that Deception, because he's going to Shechem. He's talking to his family, and he's saying, hey, make me your leader. Give me your heart. Man, it's better that I be the leader than those 70 sons of Gideon. You know, my 70 brothers, I mean, they're from other moms. We don't care about them. They're not good. Follow me. And at the end of verse 4, they followed him. Now, why did these worthless and reckless men follow him? Because he had the cheddar. He had the money. He had money, and he hired them. That's why they followed him. Now, if you have to hire people to follow you, then guess what? You're not a leader. Okay? If you're a leader, then there better be somebody following. And it better not be people that you had to hire to follow you. Okay? That's not leadership. If you got to hire people, no good. No bueno. Okay? Now, beginning of verse 5, it says, then he went to his father's house at Ophrah Winfrey and killed his... Just kidding. Then he went to his father's house at Ophrah and killed his brothers, the 70 sons of Jerubbaal, on one stone. So he chose a stone, and he brought him and his worthless and reckless men, brought each of those 70 sons. Now, if they were 70 sons of Jerubbaal, now follow me. I know it's lunchtime. If there's 70 sons of Jerubbaal, and he's a son of Jerubbaal, then that would make the 70 sons and Abimelech, what? That's correct, brothers. Yeah, they were brothers. Yeah, they're brothers. So, wait, what did he just do? He just went, gathered up his brothers, and killed all of them one by one on the same stone. Probably, my guess is that, you know, laid them on the stone and probably, you know, maybe moved their head just a little bit, you know, just a couple of inches off their shoulders, you know. But probably, you know, he killed them there. So, there are, again, in case it's not registering, this is what you call red flags, okay? If you pick a leader, you give him some money, him or her, you give them some money, some authority, and then they go out and get worthless and reckless people, that's a red flag. Well, I guess the first red flag was, please, 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 let me be your leader. Let me be your leader. Let me be your leader. If they're begging for it, it's like, we need to find somebody else. Okay? That was the first red flag. Second red flag, he took the money, went and got worthless and reckless people. Okay? This is going nowhere really, really fast. Third red flag, he killed his brothers. That's a red flag. Okay? That's a warning. This is not a good leader. Now, in verse 5, it says that he killed the 70 sons of Jerubbaal on one stone. But Jotham, the youngest son of Jerubbaal, was left because he hid himself. So there were 70 sons, but actually Jotham, the youngest son, he actually ran away and hid. So that means that he actually only killed 69 officially. Okay? But he hid himself. And it says in verse 6, and all the men of Shechem gathered together all of Beth Millo, so all the men of Shechem, all the men of Beth Millo, and they went and made Abimelech, what does it say there? That they made him king. They made him king beside the terebinth tree at the pillar that was in Shechem. Now, before we get to the pillar in Shechem, let's just talk about this real quickly. They made Abimelech king, but that doesn't make him a king. God does the appointing. God does the positioning. What are we told in the Bible? Position does not come from the east or the west. It comes from the Lord. Okay, that's where positions come from. That's where promotion comes from. It comes from the Lord. But they decided, hey, Abimelech is our king, the first king of Israel. First king of Israel, right here. First king of Israel. But he's not officially the king, not recognized by God, because God didn't choose him. The people did. Now, what leader did they just listen? Just take a step back real quick. This man came appealing for the position. Please, I want to be your leader. I'm a great leader. Please, hire me. He gets money, and the first thing he does is he hires worthless and reckless men. That should have been like, no, this is going nowhere. This is no good. The second thing he does is he kills all of his brothers, except for one, but he kills all of them. Now, after appealing for the job, hiring worthless and reckless men, killing all of his brothers, not his enemies, not neighbors, not, some people in a different land, his brothers. After those three things, the men of Shechem and Beth Millo went, oh, this is a great leader. We should make him our king. Now, some of you, at least one of you, you're laughing because you realize that this is a really dumb decision. Really dumb decision. If somebody is leading and they're leading in the wrong direction, maybe don't follow. Okay? Maybe don't follow. If somebody's leading in the wrong direction, don't follow. But they decide, no, this is great. Let's make him our king. Now, they do that in verse 6 beside the terebinth tree at the pillar that was in Shechem. Now, the terebinth tree, we read that, and it's not clear whether that's, it could actually be a nut tree or it could be an oak tree. And the nuts, I think, were they talking about cashew? I don't remember what kind of nut they were talking about, but they're not clear on what the tree is, but that's not really important. What's important is there was the tree at the pillar that was in Shechem. So this is a specific location. And it is believed that this tree and this pillar, that's where Joshua had set up a monument to God. Had the law of God on it so that they would always come back to that and go, look, this is who we are. This is our identity. We follow God. We don't follow people, men, bad leaders. We don't follow Abimelech. We follow God. And here's his word, which gives us guidance and direction. So that's where they anoint him king. That's where they made him king. They bring Abimelech to that spot of all spots. And they say, hey, stand right here next to the monument that's to God, and we're going to make you our king. Even though God didn't make you king, but we're making you king. And even though you killed your own brothers, and that wouldn't be approved by God, but we're going to go ahead and make you our king anyways. So stand right here. That pillar, it is believed that would be, that's what they called the monument to God there. So totally disregarding what God had, any memory of God, what God had set up. They're totally disregarding that and going with their flesh, doing what they want to do. This is bad news, okay? Bad leadership. Don't follow that kind of leadership. That's the point here. Now, we've got deception, and then in verses 5 through 6, the ones we just read, I titled death. It went from, listen, conspiracy involved deception, that's lying, and then it ended in death for the 69 sons of Gideon. Now again, let me remind you, what did we start out talking about? The effects of sin. And when you and I are involved in sin and we do not repent from that, eventually we're going to see the consequences of that. So you can sin, you can continue in sin. And sometimes what I have found is that God will allow you to go for a long time living in sin. Why does he do that? Does he not care? Is he not watching? Maybe he's busy, orchestrating the World Series. What's he doing? Like maybe he's just not paying attention. What's he doing? No, he's giving us time to come to our senses and turn away from that sin and turn back to him. But what happens is oftentimes we take that to mean like, oh, I guess maybe either God approves or maybe he's just not watching. So I'm going to continue to get away with this. And what we do is we do not turn back to God, and we just continue in our sin, and we think, oh, I'm going to get away with it. Please. Please. God's keeping count. He always does. And here, Gideon married all these women. He had all these kids, all these sons. And Gideon, he died. Maybe when he died, he's thinking, oh, man, I got away with it. Man, God's going to bless my family anyways. Well, God allowed the consequences of Gideon's own sin to play out, and now here it is. His family is in absolute chaos. Absolute chaos. And maybe you go, well, Gideon's long gone. What does he care? Maybe that's your thinking. But this is Gideon, the man that was used by God. He now here's his family suffering for his own choices. No doubt he must have suffered too at the end of his life, just all the chaos that goes along with marrying 70 different people and all of that. But this is the consequence of sin here. Starts it's conspiracy. It starts with deception, ends in death. Now, the second section here is where we see, and I do not, for those of you that are taking notes, I do not have any subpoints in here. This is a really neat section. It's Jotham, the youngest son. Here's what happens in verse 7. Now when they told Jotham, he went and stood on the top of Mount Gerizim. Okay, another key spot in the life of Israel. And he lifted his voice and cried out, and he said to them. Now what he does here is he's going to share a story in the form of a parable. Now just in case some of you like to know these kinds of things, this is the first parable in the Bible. We know that Jesus used parables all the time. This is the first one in the Bible, first recorded one in the Bible. Isn't that cool? So here's what he says. Listen to me, you men of Shechem, that God may listen to you. You listen to me, what I'm telling you, and maybe God will listen to you. He says in verse 8, the trees, he's talking about trees here. The trees once went forth to anoint a king over them. Now, what he's doing is he's using this story to illustrate an earthly point here. And he starts by saying, the trees once went forth to anoint a king over them. Who do you think that is? Who do you think the trees are referring to? Exactly, the men of Shechem and Beth Millo. And they said, we want a king. Well, they said to the olive tree, those trees said to the olive tree, reign over us. Be our king. Well, what he's talking about here is actually referring all the way back. It's not just the men of Shechem. It's not just the men of Beth Millo. It's everybody in Israel. Here's what he's doing. He's taken us back to the previous chapter when there was a battle. Gideon had led the 300 men in battle. They won the battle. And then Israel said, be our king. And then they said to him, after you're done being our king, let your son be our king. And then after your son's done being our king, then let your grandson be our king. In other words, Gideon, we want you to be king and start a dynasty. We want a ruler. We want you to rule over us. And that feels so good, doesn't it, when people are like, we want you to lead us. You're the greatest. You just like, oh man, finally somebody recognizes my greatness, And then you just want to jump into that role. Well, Gideon came up with the best answer ever. He tells them, no, I'm not going to be your king. And neither is my son. And he didn't mention his grandson also, but he made it clear. I'm not going to be your king, and neither is my son. And then he said to them, God will rule over you. So let it be a theocracy. Just let God be the leader. Don't pick a human leader. Just let God do that. That's what it's talking about in verse 8. They said to the olive tree. So that means that Gideon is represented by the olive tree. And they said, reign over us. Verse 9, but the olive tree said to them, should I cease giving my oil with which they honor God and men and go to sway over trees? In other words, Gideon, his answer was like, you want me to stop serving God in order to be your king? Nah, not going to happen. Verse 10, what did the trees do? Then the trees said to the fig tree, you come and reign over us. It is believed that that represents one of Gideon's sons. Remember, they said, hey, be our king. And then after you're done, let your son be our king. And then after your son, let your grandson. So one of his sons would be represented by the fig tree. Then the trees in verse 10 said to the fig tree, you come and reign over us. But the fig tree said to them, should I cease my sweetness and my good fruit and go to sway over trees? Nah. Right? No way. Verse 12, another one of Gideon's sons. Then the trees said to the vine, you come and reign over us. But the vine said to them, should I cease my new wine, with which cheers both God and men, and go to sway over trees? Then all the trees said to the bramble, you come and reign over us. Now what is the bramble? We've seen an olive tree, we've seen a fig tree, we've seen the vine. What is a bramble? Bramble is a beautiful, luscious tumbleweed. Now we know that tumbleweeds are not beautiful and luscious, right? They're huge, especially out here in the feed, man. You guys got some crazy tumbleweeds. Even going down Scott Road, when it's tumbleweed season, goodness, things could dent your car, man. You got to be careful. You got manly tumbleweeds out here, tough. What is bramble? Bramble is a thorn bush. It's just a thorny bush. It's not a tree. It's a bush. It's a shrub. It's like a tumbleweed. Nobody likes tumbleweeds. But here's what happens. They said in verse 14, then all the trees said to the bramble, you come and reign over us. And the bramble said to the trees, if in truth you anoint me as king over you, then come and take shelter in my shade. You want me to be your leader? Come and rest in my shade. Take shelter in my shade. And then the bramble went on to say this, but if not, let fire come out of the bramble and devour the cedars of Lebanon. If you don't want me to be king, then I'm going to shoot fire and just destroy all of you. Now, red flags. We've been talking about red flags. If a potential leader says to you, hey, make me your king, make me your leader, and come gather to me. But if you don't do that, I'm going to kill you. Then it's a pretty clear sign that that's not a good leader. Okay? It's not a good leader. That's what he's pointing out that this bramble did. This bramble said, listen, you want me to be your king? Oh, that's great. Come and rest in my shade. I mean, think about a tumbleweed. Even when tumbleweeds, before they become tumbleweeds and they're just big green bushes out in the middle of the field, are they shady? I mean, maybe for lizards, field mice, snakes, squirrels, rabbits, I guess. But they're not shady. They're not providing anything. They dry up. They blow away into your mom's car, right? Mom runs over them. They're good for nothing. But this bramble is saying, hey, if you want me to be your leader, come gather me. Let's go. But if not, I'm going to kill you. That's a good sign that that's not, the good leader. You young ladies, if he says, hey, you should marry me, I'll be a great husband. But if you don't, I'm going to kill you. It's a good sign. It's a sign that, like, okay, I don't think this is a good husband. That's not a good thing. If somebody's threatening to kill you, not a good leader. And then he says, but let fire come out of the bramble, devour the cedars of Lebanon. Now in verse 16, now therefore, if you have acted in truth and sincerity in making Abimelech king, and if you have dealt well with Jerubbaal in his house, and have done to him as he deserves. I'll explain all of this, okay? For my father fought for you, risked his life, and delivered you out of the hand of Midian. Let's stop there, actually. Let me explain something to you. Notice the four. You got the olive tree. So it's got olives on it, which are really good on pizza. Okay, or you can use it to make olive oil. Or you just eat the olives or whatever. lots of different things you can do. Press the oil, you can produce, different things, process them. And then he mentions the fig tree. Okay, the fig tree. Fig tree gives figs. Figs are godly. They're sweet, some of the best fruit in the world. Wonderful, they produce. Vine, what does a vine do? Vine grows grapes. You can pluck the grapes off. You can eat them. You can make them into grape juice. You can make them into wine. Or their highest calling is what? Grape jelly. Okay, so you can make grape jelly. You do lots of things. What does the bramble do? Absolutely nothing. There's nothing produced. But they went to these other individuals, and instead of going, oh, you know what? These good trees don't want to rule over us. Maybe we don't need a ruler. They just kept looking, hungry for leadership. Okay, and they found the bad leader, the bramble, and said, you lead us. And the bramble's like, all right, yeah, I can do that. But if you don't want me to be the leader, I'm going to kill you. It was bad news all the way around. They didn't recognize the red flags. So in verse 16, Jotham starts talking to him again. He's done with his story, and he says, therefore, if you have acted in truth and sincerity, if you did the right thing, making Abimelech king, and if you have dealt well with Jerubbaal, if you think Gideon, my dad, this is Jotham speaking, if you think my dad would have approved, and you have done to him as he deserves, what did he deserve? What did Gideon deserve? He points out, verse 17, my father fought for you. He risked his life. And he delivered you out of the hand of Midian. So he saved you guys. Verse 18, but you have risen up against my father's house this day. You killed his 70 sons on one stone, and made Abimelech, the son of his female servant, king over the men of Shechem, because he is your brother. So you disregarded my dad, killed all of his sons, and you made this guy Shechem your leader. Verse 19, if then you have acted in truth and sincerity with Jerubbaal and with his house this day, then rejoice in Abimelech and let him also rejoice in you. If you made the right choice, then let there be rejoicing. But in verse 20, if not, let fire come from Abimelech and devour the men of Shechem and Beth Millo, and let fire come from the men of Shechem and from Beth Millo and devour Abimelech. If this is the wrong choice, then let you guys destroy one another. There's the curse part of this whole thing. And Jotham ran away and fled, and he went to Beer. He didn't go have a beer, okay? He went to Beer and dwelt there for fear of Abimelech, his brother, which is a smart move. He ran away from Abimelech, went and hid. But what he just did was he just pronounced a curse. He said, if this was a right choice, then let there be rejoicing. But if it's the wrong choice, then let you too, Abimelech and the people of Shechem and Beth Millo, let you guys destroy one another. And there. Now, that gives you a key, and I know it's anticlimactic, but what's the rest of the chapter about, which we won't get to today? What's the rest of it about? It's about the destruction of Abimelech and the people of Shechem and Beth Millo, and how they destroyed one another. Because what happened? All the way back to the beginning of our study, God allowed Gideon to marry multiple women. Didn't tell him to, didn't okay it, but he did it. From that came the 70 sons, came Abimelech, came envy, came hungry for leadership, came greediness, came all of those things. And now what's going to happen is they're going to destroy one another, the result of sin. The result of sin is what? Self-destruction. That's what sin does. When we sin, we are destroying ourselves. It's self-destruction. The wages of sin, the Bible tells us in the New Testament, the wages of sin is death. But the gift of God is eternal life in Christ Jesus. So it may be that you have chosen up to this point to live a life of sin, to just give into it and just go with it. Because who cares about what my parents experienced, right? That's what happened here. Gideon, whatever, he's gone, he's dead, he's old. Who cares about him? I don't care what God did through him. Where's God now? And so you may, up to this point, have chosen in your own life to say, my mom and dad, man, they're always talking about God or reading the Bible or talking about Jesus or, you know what, but I don't have time for that. You know, I don't need God like my parents do. I'm fine without God. What you have done is you've chosen a life of sin. And you may be thinking, well, I mean, I'm living fine. I got what I need, and I got clothes, and I got a ride to the mall, and I got my electric bike or whatever. And like, I don't really need God. What you've done is you've chosen sin, and maybe you're thinking, well, God's not judging me, so I guess I'm okay. Maybe He's just allowing you time to turn, to stop, and to choose Him before He judges you. The wages of sin is death. What does that mean? What does that mean? The wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life. When it says that the wages of sin is death, it doesn't just mean dying, just, my body dies, okay, I'm done. What it's talking about is eternity in hell. The Bible actually talks about hell. It teaches that there is a hell, a real heaven and a real hell. And when it says the wages of sin is death, that's what it's talking about. The wages of sin, the payment for sin, for a life of sin, is hell. But the gift of God is eternal life in Christ Jesus. Oh, that's wonderful news. Because if I've been a sinner up to this point, and everybody sins. Everybody sins. I struggle with sin. Everybody struggles with it. Every Christian does. But if up to this point you've been forsaking God and saying, you know what, I don't who cares about what my mom and dad think about God? I don't care. I'm doing my own thing. And I seem to be fine. I'm doing well. If you're choosing that kind of a life, well, the wages for that, the payment for that, is death. And what that means is eternal death, eternity in hell. But the gift of God is eternal life in Christ Jesus. What does that mean? That's great news. That means if I've been a sinner up to this point, that means that I can get salvation, the gift of God, eternity, right? Salvation, eternity with Him. I can get that in exchange for sin and going to hell. Hell or heaven? Eternal punishment? I don't mean to laugh, but it's just why would it even be a choice? It's not, eternity in hell, suffering, or eternity with God, forgiveness of sin, joy. Why wouldn't I want to do that? But people every single day choose hell, every single day. I spoke with a young man probably about a month ago in here. He came in here during the week, and he's like, hey, I want to talk to a pastor. I got called in. I came in, and I said, look, he was telling me about his lifestyle, and he's living a rough lifestyle. And I said, look, man, you need Jesus. You need to get saved. And he goes, okay, yeah, I want to do that. And I said, okay, but let me explain to you. What I mean is, when you get saved, what I'm telling you is you got to give your life to Jesus. It doesn't just mean you get fire insurance, like, oh, well, you know what, I'm a Christian now, so I'll go to heaven. It's not just okay, I just say it, and so it's true. And I explained that to this young man. I said, you got to give your life to Jesus. This is a young man. He had already been in and out of jail. Young man. None of you have ever been to jail, probably? And this young man had been in and out of jail. And I said, you got to give your life to Jesus. He goes, oh, hold on. He literally said, I don't want to do that. I said, why not? He goes, I don't want to give my life to Jesus. I got some things that I still need to do. I said to him, I said, do you understand? I asked him this. I said, do you know what would happen? I said, let's say you walk out of here, you jump on your bike, you ride down Scott Road Freeway, and you get hit by a car and die. I said, what's going to happen to you? He said, I'll go to hell. I said, but you don't, that's okay. He goes, well, I still got some things I got to take care of. People choose hell all the time. Maybe you want to choose hell. I don't know what you've heard about hell, but it's not like, party and, oh, my friends are going to be there. It talks about weeping, gnashing of teeth, which means grinding of teeth. It speaks of, the description in the Bible talks about eternal fire, eternal judgment, darkness. So why not say, you know what, Lord, I'm done with this life of sin. The wages of sin is death. I don't want that. But the gift of God is eternal life. I want that. And give your life to Jesus. Just tell him that today. Lord, my life is yours. I'm done living that life. I want to be yours, Lord. Give me your forgiveness of sins. Give me eternal life. I want that. I'm going to pray, and then I've got a few announcements before we get out of here, before we set you free. Open the gates and set you free. Father, thank you so much for